continuous classes from Monday to Saturday, each day from 3 to 4:15. So welcome all to this program. So we can start with a brief introduction of all our participants. So back in Hub team, myself Rajalakshmi, I am working here as a project coordinator. We have Rajagopal sir.
Hello. Good afternoon to all. My name is Arun Chan. I am recently joined as a project coordinator in this ECHO program. Thank you.
So I think we can have an introduction from all. Sunil sir.
Hello all, I am Dr. Sonil Kumar. I am the Additional Director of Trivandrum Institute of Palliative Sciences and will be the facilitator for this ECHO program. And I also request you to keep you muted all the time. And if you want to ask any questions, please raise your hands and we can unmute you. So welcome you all.
Thank you, sir. Pranav sir, can you give you a brief introduction about yourself? Sir, can you enable?
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
My name is Pranav Kumar Vasu. I am from EIPC Eastern India Palliative Care. I am very much interested in this session because of this COVID-19 coronavirus, and this is a trying time, global time, especially in India. Now it is aggravating like fire. So this is my introduction. I am Pranav Kumar Vasu.
Thank you, sir. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
our program.
Thank you, ECHO and Palliam India.
Thank you, sir. Runa Mitra.
Hello, good afternoon. I am Runa Mitra, Eastern India Palliative Care, working with cancer patient, palliative cancer patient.
Thank you, Runa. Welcome to our program. Dr. Manveer Kaur.
Hello, I am Dr. Manveen Kaur. I am a fellow in geriatric medicine at the Department of Geriatrics in Government Medical College, Aurangabad.
Thank you, ma'am. Welcome to our program. Devarun.
Devarun Sarkar, please speak up. Everybody, please be ready to come next and be brief. Thank you. Devarun, go to the next.
Sacred Heart General Hospital. Yes, sisters. Can you give us a brief introduction about
Hello.
Sacred Heart General Hospital. We can't hear you, sister.
Must be muted. By the time they get it sorted out, can you go on to the next, please?
Devarun, can you give your brief introduction? Devarun.
Hello, I am Devarun Sarkar. I am social worker and Eastern India Palliative Care, EOX in charge, Barakpur.
Thank you, sir. Welcome to our program. Sacred Heart Hospital.
Hello, sisters. Will you please speak up?
Nimmi.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, Nimmi, we can hear you.
Yeah, I am Sister Nirmala Immaculate, working at for the Puttur Hospital. I am a general nurse, staff nurse there.
Thank you, ma'am. Welcome to our program.
Yes, sir.
Galaxy J7. Who have logged in as Galaxy J7, can you speak up? Dr. Vimala? Dr. Vimala? Doctor, we can hear you.
Dr. Vimala, please speak up.
Hello, I'm Dr. Vimala. I just finished my house urgency.
Where are you?
Hello?
Which part of the country are you in?
Okay, I'm from Ernakulam.
Okay, welcome, doctor.
Thank you, ma'am. Welcome. Nidhi Raval? Nidhi, can you unmute and speak?
Hello, Mr. Jagdish. Thank you for joining. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much for having me. I am not a doctor, I'm a journalist. I've had the pleasure of connecting with Dr. Rajgopal through Dr. T. Jacob John at CMC Vellore. I'm very excited at the kind of work that you have been doing, and we intend to write a bit about it. So I'm here kind of just listening in and learning. And thank you for having me.
Jagdish, thank you very much for giving your time. He is here by special invitation because we strongly feel that the need for palliative care and COVID treatment needs to be published, to be made public. The awareness has to be improved. So, Mr. Jagdish, thank you for giving your time and being here with us for the day.
Thank you, sir. You have been doing pioneering work. I'm really touched, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Biju Raghavan? Dr. Biju, can you unmute from your end and speak?
Hi, I'm in my OP, so please forgive my appearance. Hello, sir. Good to see you. And I'm Dr. Biju Raghavan. I'm a consultant in pain and palliative medicine at Rajagiri Hospital, Aluva, which is in Ernakulam district, state of Kerala.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Shobha?
Hello everyone, I'm Shobha. I'm Professor in Palliative Medicine at Amruta Institute of Medical Sciences, Kochi. Good to be here.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Sunita Dayan?
Hello, ma'am.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Sunita. I'm a specialist medical officer in palliative medicine, works in General Hospital Ernakulam, Kochi, Kerala. Good to be here. Hi, sir.
Thank you. HK Das, sir. Sir, can you unmute and speak? Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dr. HK Das from ICMR Dibrugarh.
Thank you, sir. Welcome to our program. So I hope we have finished our introduction round. Is there anyone who haven't introduced yet? Sacred Heart Convent Hospital. Dr. Mohammed. Dr. Mohammed, can you hear us? Sir, can you unmute from your end and speak?
Sisters in Sacred Heart Hospital. Sisters, would you like to introduce yourself? You are muted now. You are muted.
No, sister, we can hear.
We cannot hear you.
Are you using headset?
No. Sorry, sisters, we cannot hear you. We will have to work out that technology for next session. But I hope you can hear us. Sisters, if you can hear us, please raise your hand. Okay, very good. Yeah.
Can you type your details in the chat box? I think we can move on to today's session. Dayalakshmi?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So today we are starting with the relevance of palliative care in the times of COVID-19 and including some aspects on symptom management. So this session will be led by Dr. M.R. Rajagopal, who is the Director of Trivandrum Institute of Palliative Sciences and Chairman of Pallium India. Welcome, sir, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Sunil, and thank you, Rajashmi, thank you, Arun, and welcome everybody. So glad to have this group with us today.
So from Sacred Heart Hospital, they says there are 5 staff nurses.
Hi. Where is Sacred Heart Hospital? Alapura. Okay, right. Oh, yes. Welcome, sisters. So we are going to talk about some things that are, I believe, very important. Arun, can you start sharing the screen, please? Earlier this year, a few months back, the world started shaking and slowly started turning upside down, and somewhere we are at a loss. Most of us wouldn't have faced so much of uncertainty in our lives, and we are left wondering what's going to be in store for us next week, next month, next year. Fortunately, generally our country seems to have done well, and Kerala particularly has done well and has won global acclaim in the way it handled the crisis. We are all very proud of what has been achieved in Kerala. The minimum number of deaths, the minimum hospitalization, and the good record of recovery. Having said all that, the strict lockdown is just being relaxed. People are coming from abroad. They are all going to be quarantined, and we are worried about the impact, what may ensue. What seems to be certain is that with the community spread will come a lot of infections, new infections. And it's inevitable that some of them will prove to be serious. What the country and the state so far has not talked about is how to relieve suffering. Generally in this session today, which will be a bit short, less than the usual because we so far have had, in the first session we spent some time in the introductions. But in taking about half an hour, I plan to introduce the subject and leave details of every session to the succeeding sessions which will happen from tomorrow till Saturday. Today, what I hope to achieve here is clarity on what is palliative care. As I see it, amongst the participants, there are a good number of people who are already in palliative care. There are several people who are new to it. So I will take a moment to explain what exactly palliative care is, and I'll emphasize on what is not palliative care. In the sense, there are a lot of misconceptions about it. So we'll talk about the myths and correct them, and then we'll talk about the suffering in COVID. With any disease, what the doctors learn in medical college is prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. Nowhere is the suffering associated with diseases taught, learned, or practiced. In the context of COVID-19, that seems to be particularly tremendous because there's a lot of suffering all compressed into a short period of time. No time for people to get used to the idea. And how that suffering is to be dealt with is one of the things that we'll talk about. And also, whatever we do, some people are going to die of COVID-19, especially people of my age. Especially people of my age or older who have associated comorbidities like liver disease, kidney disease, heart disease, lung disease, etc., diabetes. And we, therefore, will need, with your help, compassionate care at the end of life. So these are the few things that we will talk about. You will all have a copy of the presentation, of course. And we have given two resources that I would request you to download later and keep in your computer. One is an electronic book created by a group of 22 palliative care specialists. Some of them are here with us today. And that with which we also could associate, I believe is a brilliant document, very useful. And also, we would recommend that you download the so-called PalliCare, P-A-L-L-I-K-A-R-E app, and that will also help as a quick reference guide for symptom control in palliative care. So with that, let us plunge into the subject and see first what is palliative care. If you look at the screen, the first is a part of the WHO definition. I've just taken the liberty to take one part of it because the full definition is about this long. I've given the reference there. You can access it by Googling for it. Palliative care is about improving the quality of life of any patient with life-threatening illness and the family is what WHO said. But that was 18 years back. It's about quality of life. To improve quality of life, you have to understand the elements of suffering and treat them, prevent and treat them. True. The word life-threatening created a bit of confusion because what is life? If I am existing as an inert body with just a beating heart, that may still be life in a very biological sense, but in a larger sense, life involves some enjoyment of life, some contribution to the world around you. Therefore, if you define life as something more than just existence, this is fine. What am I saying? You shouldn't use that phrase to interpret that only if it is immediately fatal, it is life-threatening. For example, if I am paralyzed below the waist, confined to 4 walls, going out twice a year only to go to the hospital, my life is threatened in the most horrible way. So let us take it that way. But anyway, 2 years back, or less than that, 1.5 years back, a Lancet Commission on Global Access to Palliative Care gave us another phrase which describes our focus beautifully. They say, the Lancet Commission of 2018 said, palliative care is for prevention and management of all serious health-related suffering. Serious health-related suffering. I would encourage, if you can find the time later, to download that document. It's a very long document, but it has a 4 or 5 page executive summary. Just read through the executive summary, it will be informative. So that's the introduction. So what have I said? I have said what palliative care is, and arising from that, it also comes what is not palliative care. It's not only for cancer. Many people associate it with for cancer. Many palliative care centers in the country look after only people with cancer. I think that is inequitable and against the principles of natural justice. You would not dream in the name of discrimination, the name of religion, caste, or creed, would you? We discriminate in the name of a diagnosis. There is something unfair about it. Secondly, it is not only for the dying person. We have already labored that point. And there is another document which will be interesting for you to look at. That is the recommendation of the World Health Assembly in 2014. World Health Assembly is the decision-making body of the World Health Organization. And in 2014, they came out with a resolution which asked all member countries, including India, to integrate palliative care into all healthcare. Every 2 years, they are meeting again to recheck how much progress that has been made. And I must admit that unfortunately, while India attends those meetings every 2 years, we don't seem to have done much. Remember, what they are saying is that palliative care should be integrated into all healthcare across the continuum of disease from the beginning and the suffering to the end. And remember only, the end is not the death of the patient. Remember, palliative care is also for the family, especially in something like COVID. The agonizing suffering that a person will be left with, the family will be left with, also should be part of our business. And that is a final point to be remembered, the family's care. Now, as I said in the beginning, palliative care becomes particularly relevant in the context of COVID because it comes on suddenly. It's all around us, but we still somehow in the back of our minds hope that it is somebody else's business. And then one morning, you have a diagnosis. Your mind has no time to prepare for that. And before you know what's happening, you are in a vehicle and taken to an isolation ward with the knowledge that you may not see your family ever again. This can be the final thing. If any other disease, you will get to see your family again in the hospital, at least during visiting times. Here, it may be never. And especially, as I said, for the elders with comorbidities, the prognosis is very bad. And the isolation and the loneliness is intensely causing suffering for the patient and for the family. And while many of you, if you see a person in agony, in pain or emotional suffering, you may sit near the person, hold a hand, lean forward, look into the eyes, and convey that you care for the patient. But here, you are covered up with all kinds of garbs and goggles and hardly visible. And generally, you reduce touch to a minimum, even with your gloves. Dr. Biju Raghavan, in one of our sessions sometime back, mentioned that there should be a smiley in your voice. I love that phrase, Biju. With what we have, our voice, our look, even through the goggles, we should convey to the person that we care for him. We understand their suffering, and that we'll be with them in their journey. And of course, there are a lot of ethical dilemmas that will come with this. It could happen to any one of you facing me as a patient. I am there in front of you. I am breathing like that. I can't get air in. Your oxygen is not helping me enough. You feel, I don't want that ventilator, but you feel you should ventilate me. Ventilators would be in short supply. If community spread happens fairly fast, we will not have enough ventilators. Nobody wants to talk about it because of fear of spreading panic. That is a reality. That's the reality that Italy and Spain and all faced. So when you have a young man there or a young woman there, a young mother of 2 children, those children needing the mother so much, and on this bed there is me at the age of 72, having lived my life. How do you choose who to use that ventilator for? Who are you to decide that my life is not worth living? I am only 72. I may have so much to live. I may have so much to offer to the world. Very difficult choice. I know where I would choose. That's another thing. So this issue is going to be full of ethical dilemmas. These are things that we should think about and prepare ourselves to face in the weeks that's going to come, pretending that this doesn't happen, or saying that talking about will cause panic, let us not talk about it. It's going to find us unprepared to meet with the emergencies. So particularly, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being there in this group. So when I'm lying there in that bed, breathing like this, what would be the elements of my suffering? It is certainly the breathlessness. It is certainly the fever, the muscle pains. They can be beyond our ability to imagine. I don't know how many of you heard that, read that virologist post 2 days back. The head of WHO, Dr. Tedros, actually posted on social media about the message from a virologist who got COVID and escaped. He says he felt a pain in his head and in every hair. Can you imagine that? Pain in a hair? But that's what he felt. So the agony can be enormous. It's easy to be philosophical about somebody else's pain. It's easy to put on PPE and walk away. But this is what people feel. And we in palliative care know how to treat that pain. We know how to treat that breathlessness, not necessarily with a ventilator. Right. If I am breathless, what would I want you to do? Nurses, doctors, social workers, everybody, please come to me and talk to me and find out what my fears and concerns are. And I might then tell you that I have already written my advance directive. I have an advance directive written, signed and witnessed, which says that if I do come to that stage where my life can be sustained only with artificial ventilation, I should not be subjected to it. Instead, I should be given palliative care, the comfort care aimed at my well-being for the remainder of my days without infliction of suffering. My emotional issues, I hope somebody will listen to. When I say, I want to talk to my wife again, I want to talk to my son again, I want to see my grandchild once more, I hope there will be somebody in the team who is willing to get the mobile out, connect it, and show me my family one last time. Remember, that is so very much more important than your ventilator, out of which my chances of coming out alive are infinitely small. And that would be vitally important. And please remember that every time you see somebody with COVID there, don't see it as a body with COVID. See that person as a human being like me. with my needs, my social needs. And my social isolation may be more than I can bear. And maybe the 1 minute of humanity that you give me with your eyes, that will be precious to me. And spiritually, I may be destroyed. I may be angry with God. What kind of God is this who does this to me? I have never willfully done any harm to anybody. I have tried to do the best I can in many situations. And you do this to me? And when I question God like that, I am losing the only source of support that I have had. And that can be very damaging. And there may be no meaning to my life. I am disconnected from God. I am disconnected from my family, disconnected from my universe. And there is no meaning to my life again. Why are you keeping me alive? Allow me to go. Let me go this instant. I cannot bear to see this suffering. Maybe what I will tell you. You may not be, you won't be able to kill me. I know euthanasia is still illegal in my country. But you may still be conveyed to me that I see your suffering. Whatever I can do, I am willing to do. What you can do may be limited, but that will tell me that my life is not totally useless. There is somebody who cares for me. This nurse, this doctor, that's precious for me at that time. In that circle of physical, oh, one more point. Can you go back to the last one? You notice that each circle is encroaching onto the other. Intense physical problems will cause social, emotional, and spiritual problems. Intense emotional issues will cause physical problems. You know that. When you are very stressed, you get that headache or something else. That's common. We must understand that when somebody complains of a somatization, physical symptom that is not diagnosable on your MRI scan, that is still a real suffering in the person, even if it has a spiritual or social or emotional reason behind it. Thanks. The physical factors that the person may suffer from could be intense pain, muscle pains. I told you about that virologist sensation of pain being felt in every hair in the head. It may be incessant cough. You may not think much about cough, but suppose somebody is coughing practically every minute of the day, unable to sleep because of that, secretions, breathlessness, which is a very common symptom and a frightening symptom. And unfortunately, a lot of people with serious COVID get restless, unable to lie down or rest for even a minute. And they may get delirious, which may manifest even as hallucinations. You to go to care for him and the person, I will suspect that you are coming to kill me. And I may think that you are Yama. And that can be immensely troublesome for me and very distressing for you also. And agitation can be difficult to control unless you understand the principles of palliative care. All these symptoms would be fairly easy to handle if you may have Sunita, Shobha, or Biju with you. Because we know how symptoms can be controlled, keeping well-being in mind. That is not taught in medical school and nursing school, but is taught in palliative care. The emotional factors that the person may go through can be many. There can be a lot of fear. That's what many people say. Fear about the unknown. If it is any other disease, you know what may happen. Here, it's a mystery. Fear of the unknown, fear of breathlessness, fear of dying, and questions like, what's it like to die? What's going to happen to me? The guilt. If only I had listened to them and stayed at home, this would not have happened. Because I continue to work, maybe all this has happened and I'm doing this to my family. That guilt, the anger that each one of you feel when you are tired and ill, when you are particularly tired and stressed on a day, don't you find yourself being a bit irritable? You may still go through your work without problem, but you get back home and you snap at whoever is standing. Your child puts on the music loud and you snap at the children. You snap at your spouse. It happens to us even with ordinary day-to-day issues. But with something as big as this, your anger against your own self, against God, against Corona, all will break out against whoever is available. The available person is you, the healthcare provider. I snap at you. Please understand, at that point of time, my anger is not at you. Please bear with me. Don't snap back at me. Because my anger is arising out of my helplessness and my desperation. Please do not take it personally. My anxiety may go beyond my control into a clinical state of anxiety, and my depression may go to a state where my mind is no longer under my control. These needs to be effectively treated and handled. And remember that I may have anticipatory grief. Very often we grieve not only about what we are suffering about, not only about what we have lost, we grieve about things that we may lose. And very often there is be unnecessary grief. That also, please try to understand. During the next few days, these are things that my colleagues will describe in greater detail and take you through so that you will be at the end of the week able to do some things for suffering people that you are not able to do today. Several social factors may challenge one's quality of life. The separation from family is something that we have described. But the feeling that I may never go home and I have not even made my will. I always thought I must do it. And I went on postponing it. Oh my God, what's going to happen? My family doesn't even know where my bank accounts are. They don't know any details. And will my children fight over my property? And all this can be troublesome. Also, simple things. I quarreled with my brother 3 years back. I wish I had made up to him. I love him. I wish I could see him once more. And here, there is no opportunity. And unfortunately, in our society, people suffer from a lot of stigma and discrimination. Even in my city, there were instances where because somebody had come from abroad, the whole family was stigmatized. And not even the delivery people were going into it. They were deprived of water till the police intervened. So we can be cruel when we are afraid. And discrimination is one of the things that my family may suffer from and I may suffer from. And of course, we'll be worried about the financial implications, the loss of the income. So many people are going through that and getting financially wiped out in the meantime. Please. Already I mentioned the spiritual issues to some extent, the why me question. And if you belong to a religion where the last communion is so very important to you, and because of Corona you are deprived of it, what will that make you feel? What will it make the family feel? And in that isolation room, disconnected from everything that you were used to it all life, the loss of meaning and purpose of life, and the feeling that I am leaving nothing behind. I am only leaving my family with desolation, with destruction. That can be very, very troublesome to bear with in last few days. So far, I have been talking about various ways in which COVID causes suffering and various ways in which we can give relief. But remember, nurses, doctors, social workers, you all are armed with the medical science. You hold enormous power over that person, that's me, completely destroyed there physically, financially, socially, spiritually, emotionally. But you hold all the cards, you have the power. You also have the power to inflict horrendous suffering to me. Even if because of my age, because of any comorbidities that I may have, my chance of coming out of this is next to nothing. Though I have left my advance directive, because you are powerful, you may decide to put me on a ventilator. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been an intensivist. I did intensive care for some time. I know what it's like. I know that it can save you out of a desperate situation. If you have 6 cracked ribs, or if you have a myocardial infarction, there are so many situations where critical care, because it monitors every organ moment to moment and immediately attends to any cardiac dysfunction or whatever happens, it can save lives miraculously when lives can be salvaged. But when somebody has next to no chance of coming back to life, as in an advanced cancer, it is a horrendous infliction of suffering to allow people to die on a ventilator. In the context of COVID-19, this is where triage comes in. You have to make, an independent team has to make an estimate. In my condition, what are my chances? Reasonable chances. If not, you will have to advise me directly, appropriately, with compassion, with honesty. Help me to make the right choices and walk with me on that journey. Not drag me into that room and chain me to all those contraptions. What a way to die. Next, please. Just less than 3 weeks back, on 23rd of April, I think, a study was published from 12 hospitals in New York. I have given the reference at the end. They, out of some 5,700 patients that they treated, 320 had come to a logical conclusion. The logical conclusion being either discharge from the hospital or death. Out of the 320, the survival was only 11.9%. That's overall, all age groups together. And unfortunately for the elderly, it was even abysmally less. So we know this. This is what happens in COVID-19. What should we be doing? You should be giving me the best possible care. And the best care is not necessarily the most high-tech treatment. The best care would be the humane thing that would be best for me. The most ethically right thing for you. This is from that ICMR document of 2018, again the reference of which I have given in the end. I would recommend you to look at it, and again a long document, so just look at the executive summary, just 3 or 4 pages. This tells you something that maybe nobody told you in the medical school or nursing school. It says that talks about a doctor, but that could be true for any healthcare provider. Your duty and mine is to alleviate suffering. It is to cure sometimes. You are able to cure only 1/3 of all diseases. It is to cure sometimes relieve often, relieve all discomfort, physical, social, mental, spiritual, and comfort always. The duty of the healthcare providers to alleviate suffering. It is to cure sometimes, relieve often, and to comfort always. And ICMR adds, there exist no exceptions to this rule. This is not optional. This is your duty to me when I am a patient. I hope you will remember that. Alleviate my suffering. Certainly, cure me if you can. But when you know that you cannot, relieve my discomfort, and please, please be human and comfort me. Give me as much comfort as possible. This is where the triage comes in. What is recommended is that a team in the hospital would be doing the triage, studying my general condition, studying my medical history, assessing my current status of lungs and COVID infection, and making a judgment about how much success is likely. And if you think my success with aggressive life support measures are infinitesimally small, please tell me with compassion and honesty, as I told you once. I see that you are suffering. We want to help you. Do you understand what your current position is? Do you want to know? There will be one session on this in detail about how that communication is to be handled. And that shared decision making. You are the doctor or the nurse or the social worker, you know your science. But this is my body. Let us work together. I need your help. We will together decide how my treatment should be. And if it is my choice, please give me symptom control. Whether I am curable or not, whether I am on ventilator or not, whatever it is, please treat my pain, suffering, and other suffering as best as you can. That's your primary duty of care as a healthcare provider. But is this all practical? Busy doctors? COVID treating hospitals can get pretty busy as time goes on. We can't be. We have all these COVID treating doctors full only of doctors and nurses? We can't. People like Rona Mitra are here and willing to help. Why don't we use medical social workers, psychologists, or volunteers who are willing to learn? We make use of the service of volunteers quite a lot. And after COVID, the lockdown happened, we needed help to get people medicines, food, everything. We asked for volunteers. We almost got 100 volunteers coming forward. We could not make use of all their services. That can happen here also. There can be a lot of conversations early. Even if I have been quarantined with mild COVID at home, somebody could talk to me, engage me in my isolation. That can happen in the hospital also. And with your technology, you can still keep me connected with my family. You, with your time, can help me to come to a state of acceptance about the reality for me. And if my family is in pathological grief, going into depression, going into post-traumatic stress disorder, maybe you, the social workers and volunteers, can help more than anybody else. And when we talk about support of the family, never please forget children. Children's well-being is something that we all ignore. Whether it's the 8-year-old child or 16-year-old teenager, they are emotionally so vulnerable. Nobody talks to them. Everybody talks to the elders in the family. They need help, and that has to be remembered. So to wrap up what I'm saying, I'll again point you to that journal. The link to that is given in the bottom, and it is available for free download. That's a short article. That suggests what all needs to be done. If pain and breathlessness are to be treated effectively in COVID centers, you will need opioid medication.
Window. The elevator.
Medical personnel, healthcare providers, I'll change that, sorry. That's what they say, but I would say healthcare providers should have training on palliative care for COVID-19. And technology, which is ordinarily abused a lot, can be brought in to help the communication with the family and support the patient and family. And families, it's very important to enable families to visit virtually. I know that it may not be feasible and practical to allow them to visit in person, but partake in health decisions is quite possible. And especially something that is not mentioned in that article I would add is, for those who die, it's very important for the family to take one last look at the dead person, to say a final goodbye. And we know that in COVID-19, there is next to no risk of transmission of disease from a dead body. And just by standing here and enabling that is so important. So what I have done is to try to explain what is palliative care as serious health-related suffering. I have tried to suggest the important elements of suffering in physical, social, mental, and spiritual domains, how some of them can be alleviated, and how ethical and rational and compassionate decisions can be taken in the treatment, for which all COVID treating personnel need some training and access to inexpensive simple medicines. Unfortunately, government programs today government COVID programs have not included palliative care yet. By the time they get around to doing that, I fear that it may be too late. But thank you all for being here and undergoing the course. And together, I hope we'll be able to reduce a lot of human suffering. Thank you very much. Sunil, will you please take over and facilitate the discussion?
Thank you, sir. So many things have been made clear by sir, but still we may have many doubts. I request you to ask any doubts, or if you have any comments, please come up.
Either ask in person or by chat, Sunil?
Yeah, they can. If you have any doubts, please raise your hand so that we can unmute you. Or you can type your questions in the chat box.
Sunil, Pranab Basu has raised his hand.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, sir, for your session, for your speech. But I am sorry to say that the COVID patients who are cured and released from discharge from the hospital sometimes are not accepted by the family and the local inhabitants, neighbors. So here I believe that we have also role in palliative care to advocate, to motivate the family members to accept the patient at home.
Ramji, thank you very much. Why do the family reject the person who has had a disease? It's the same phenomenon that happened with HIV and AIDS at one time. Fear. When it comes to fear of your rest of the family and oneself, you are able to reject somebody. That's because of fear. And what happened with HIV and AIDS in many places, I've seen miracles being worked by social workers who go across to the family, give them proper information, and they heal those wounds. So thank you. Yes, stigma and lack of information is a huge issue. And so we all have the duty not only to provide care, but also to keep giving information to the common man. Thank you, Pranabji. Anybody else?
else? It may not be a question, but if you have any comments also, please come up.
Runa has asked a question. People all the time listen to COVID-19 news and television at home. They get the fear that any time he or she going to die. He or she may be going to die. Don't touch, don't take food. They got virus, depressed. What we will do? Rona, it's, you are asking an extension of a question that Pranabji mentioned. Yes, unfortunately, the public information system sometimes spreads more fear than factual information. That's very unfortunate. Yes, so proper information is the key. Certainly, hiding information is not good. That only causes more problem, but proper information is important. As no questions are coming up, which is unusual. Usually at this point, we find it difficult to handle all the questions. So what's happening? I don't know. Are people reluctant to come forward and questions? And are the young people thinking, okay, it's all old people who are asking the questions? What's the name? Marvin? Manvir? Yes, please. What's your name? Will you repeat your name?
Yeah, my name is Manveen.
Manveen. Hi, Manveen.
Hello, sir. Sir, actually, like in our setup, in our college, like palliative care is unheard of in like even while generally caring for the patient, and now incorporating it for COVID patients. I am fearful of how big a challenge it can be, and how to actually do it in such a short period of time.
Manveen, very important point. Thank you for bringing it up. I'm so glad you brought it up. Look, okay, so we have this course. You are wondering, you are a young doctor, you are wondering on Sunday, how will I be able to practice palliative care? I have never been taught this, which is unfortunate. From 2019, it is in curriculum. Unfortunately, you got away with it before that. But in COVID-19, my colleagues who will be talking to you from tomorrow till Saturday will not be trying to cover all palliative care. Specifically, they will talk about how do you get rid of that cough and breathlessness. And quite a bit of time will be spent on what do you do when the person is so anxious and afraid? How do you interact with them? So we will make this, or my colleagues will make this course so specific to those elements of suffering in COVID with a specific purpose. So that's not going to be so hard. You won't have to learn everything that a person doing MD in palliative medicine in Ahmedabad is learning. That's not necessary. But I genuinely feel, Manveen, that what you learn during this week will help you to relieve a lot of suffering in COVID people. And that will be opening the door to a field of medicine that is growing and expanding. But yes, today, less than 2% of the needy in the country have access to palliative care. And I agree that I do not know of even a single palliative care service in Aurangabad. Hi, Mr. Dr. Das.
Hello, sir. In fact, whatever you have said is quite relevant in today's context. And the bigger issue is that you have given us the options. Now all depends upon us how you exercise the options for the betterment of the patient. Is it so, sir?
That is true for the betterment of the patients and the family. Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
sir. Right.
Yeah.
That's all for my end.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Nimi?
So thank you, sir. I am Sister Nirmala. So actually, when you began this session, actually I was fearing because most of them were in palliative care. But for me, I was thinking, now what am I going to learn? But it was really great help for me, especially the factors that challenge quality of life and how it is interacted, physical, social, and emotional, spiritual, how all these were interacted. And it is so, so useful. And I just want to thank you very much for this session. And I'm grateful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Nimi, where are you from? Not Nimi, your name is Sister Vimala.
No, I'm Sister Nirmala.
Nirmala. Sister Nirmala,
Yes,
where are
sir.
you from?
Sir, I'm working in Puttur Hospital.
Puttur.
Yes,
Where
the
is
staff
Puttur?
nurse.
Where is
Karnataka.
Puttur? Karnataka.
Karnataka, near Mangalore, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Actually, I had been working outside the country, in Uganda for some years. But
Really?
yes, for 11 years I had been working. I have just joined here, transferred here. So actually, this had been a great inspiration for me. Thank you very much.
Where were you in Uganda? Where are you in Kampala?
Okay, it is within central region, Luwero, the place called Luwero, and we have a health center there. Then I also worked in the eastern Uganda.
For those who do not know this, Uganda is one of those countries in developing world
Developing
that has
world, yes.
significant palliative care service available countrywide. In
Yes,
fact,
yes,
in an evaluation by Economist Intelligence Unit, Uganda comes on above India in terms of access to good palliative care and end-of-life care. Glad to have you in the group.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thanks for your information. I am very grateful.
Thanks.
Anybody else has any more comments or questions?
Mr. Jagadish, much of the thank you for being here, and so far it has been healthcare providers who have been asking questions and taking part in discussions. But several people brought out this point, the suffering caused by lack of information, suffering caused by unnecessary fears, families rejecting their loved ones after they are cured of COVID-19. And generally, when we talk about the need for palliative care in treatment of COVID, the reaction from authorities is, no, let us not talk about death. Let us not talk about incurability. There will be panic. People will be afraid. They generally want to promote the good news. And this, I believe, is just preparing ourselves for a calamity. As a senior, famous media person, what do you feel? For one thing, do you have any questions arising from what we all discussed today? Secondly, what do you think we should be doing to make lives livable for those with COVID and to make death compassionate for those who die and lives livable for the families?
Thank you, Dr. Rajgopal. Thank you for posing these two to me. I think while I was intently listening through the conversations, what struck me was the point made by Dr. Manveen Kaur, who I think works in Aurangabad. Is that correct? Um, and she, I think, put it really very nicely when she said, in the place where I work, there is nothing like palliative care in any case. Now, if you come and tell me in a pandemic to look for it, the challenge becomes double because there is such lack of awareness of this kind of care itself that and then combine it with the situation and the pandemic, it becomes very difficult. I want to point out that as a nation, and we are not unaware, and we should not hesitate to bring this up, we are we can see the quality of care or the quality of lack of care in the way the nation has been dealing with um, migrant workers in some hospitals where people are crowding in some places where services are not good enough, and Kerala stands as a model apart. So my worry, I don't have a question, but my worry really is that um, as a society, dealing with the numbers that we deal with, care seems to be something that is not very high on the agenda. Insensitivity is very high. Um, a kind of, clearing of numbers and counting by numbers is high. The respect, the dignity, the idea of care is still at a level that is lower. Therefore, I feel the kind of work you do is really a high watermark, is my personal feeling. Uh, the second thing I want to say is that there is a lot of feeling that the media has, and I was talking to another doctor who was in Haryana this morning, and he said the same thing, that people are very scared and worried about the disease, and they feel that this is the death sentence, and many are just trying to run away from hospitals without understanding the dynamic at play here. Um, I want to suggest that the media itself is groping. Don't forget, many of our media papers are not publishing. Many of our journalists can't go out in the field. Many of us are in a situation where the government itself has not really opened up for free information. Would you be surprised to know that 3 days back, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare on the website put up a notice that said we will now update numbers only once a day and not twice a day, and there was no reason given. So we didn't understand many steps of the government also. In this confusion, uh, what we get is what we get. Really, we cannot complain because everybody is learning. Um, my suggestion and my whole idea is the more we get the information out, the more we talk, the more we try to tell people, the more you have seminars of this kind that you're having, is the only way to do this bit by bit and send the message out. What else can be done? Because I think we are still not clear whether the numbers will jump up or no, and where we will go with lack of ventilators, lack of even beds. There was a picture yesterday in Bombay where there are 2 people on one bed in a large municipal hospital. So very difficult and very complex issue. Uh, One can only keep talking, and keep communicating, and and be tireless in those efforts, and get the message out. I don't know if that made sense, but that was my little input, and I'm willing to dialogue on this, of course. I can't hear you. You're mute, I think.
I'm sorry, typical of me. And thank you, Mr. Jagdish. I'm so glad you brought those points out. I totally agree. Yes, the first point, there is so little palliative care. Manmeet possibly has never seen palliative care being given after calling, though she is qualified as a doctor. In that context, her question and your point are similar. I would say, again, just borrowing that title from Arundhati Roy, the pandemic is a portal. As it happens, the elements of suffering in COVID-19 are things that can be easily alleviated to a large extent and things that can be easily taught to medical and nursing personnel. And the advantage will not only be in well-being of patients and families. I think if we could get some decision makers, policy makers, politicians, bureaucrats to listen, they will see how advantageous it is for the management. Look, there are some realities. The government wants to be seen as doing the right thing, right? If tomorrow so many patients come and there are not enough ventilators, you mentioned that, Mr. Jagdish. There are not, if there are not enough ventilators, how are they going to handle that? The real answer is not to make makeshift ventilators which will be actually killers. The real answer is to do the triage, use the ventilators on people who will be benefited by it, avoid using it on people for whom it will be only causing suffering. And this is not rocket science. Those who are going through the remaining 5 days of the course will see that what we need to do is not rocket science. What we need to do is not expensive. It's very human. And if we are able to get the ear of the decision makers and tell them and get them to see that the triage that we are talking about and the care that we are going to talk about will be things that will be to the advantages of the governments, that will make a seemingly unmanageable situation manageable. We have that opportunity to convey that. And your second point is that the fear. Yes, that is so very sad. And some of the fear is realistic, much of the fear is unrealistic. Yes, as you say, except to keep on shouting the truth from the rooftops. Truth may not be popular, but as it is said in the Bible, the truth will set you free, but first it will make you miserable. People are afraid of speaking the truth for fear of making the public afraid. But they need to be helped to face the truth, and only that will take the fear away.
Correct. Very true. I want to make another point in the case quickly without taking too much time, which is that unfortunately many people are dying alone because of the infectious nature of the disease. Now, it is not as infectious as it is made out to be, but in many hospitals, the elderly people are alone without their loved ones. That puts a double whammy on palliative care. There is no loving touch, there is no loving face, there is a sterile nurse and a sterile doctor who are ill-equipped to understand palliative care and may or may not deliver it. So this is a double problem in this case, and I don't know how you respond. Or
Absolutely right. Like, we do not know enough about COVID. That's part of the problem. It came up, new virus, new strain of virus. Its behavior is still not clear. We thought the period of spread was 7 days, then we thought it was 14 days, then we thought it was 28 days, and now we have find that it can happen even after 37 days. So there is this unknown element of the issue. Yes, allowing the family to come and be with the patient is not tried yet because of the fear. But if a loved one of mine was in hospital and I wanted to visit that person, if we are talking about that individuals, me and that person, I believe it would be right and ethically mandatory to allow me to go and see that person with proper PPE. But I can also see that in a country like ours, when we are talking about the large numbers, when we are talking about the common good, this may not be manageable just yet. Which is why I was suggesting that is what is necessary, but we can't do it. At least let us use technology. Let us use technology so that if I am lying in that bed, I'll be able to say one final goodbye to my family. They need it. I need it.
Sir, our time is up. Shall I close the session?
Certainly, you are the boss. Thank you very much, everybody. Sunil, thank you for facilitating this.
So, thank you, sir. So we talked about mainly on the sufferings that the people can have with the COVID, and what all can be done, and this will be subsequently dealt in the following in the upcoming sessions. So thank you all. Thank you, sir, for this wonderful session, and thank you all for your comments and questions. And before you leave, I request you to please do this feedback questionnaire so that we can improve.
Do please help us by filling up the
valuable
feedback. We are very keen that we should get some feedback so that we are able to document, and that helps us to improve. Thank you very much.